All right, good afternoon. Today we're going to review the notes that you read about the post-classical world. So hopefully you took some detailed notes, you tried to refresh your memory, maybe you searched through your old notes, your binder. That would be very helpful. So let's put our title at the top. The post-classical world. And if you have any other colored pencils, it's always nice to get those out. So we can kind of like make our notes pop a little bit. Just a reminder, so what kind of what chapters are we looking at? Hopefully at this point, you might even want to use Post-its and label your chapters. Some people have been on that from the beginning. This is basically chapters 8 in the book through 14. This is your Voyages book, 8 through 14. And the time period is a little bit of starts a little bit earlier based on the curriculum. But it's good for context, but the time period in this section, the time period in our notes is a little over technically. The post-classical world that we're going to be looking at for the test is 1200, but in this reading, it starts at 600. So just to kind of put that in context a little bit. So it's slightly different, but that's okay for what we're doing our study for right now. So it's about 600 to 1450. So some things that they want you to remember, the goals is coming out of the classical world. So which countries were in the classical world? The same ones that were in the classical world before. So let's talk about, you should have noticed that the notes were organized by regions, and that kind of talks about it a little bit. So major empires had just fallen, like the Roman Empire, the Chinese Han Empire had just fallen. Almost everywhere collapsed. And so what are these empires doing? They're going to revive. They're going to restore power. So we're going to say, what is our goal for all these regions around the world? Okay, political and social power. Now you should have noticed in the notes, there's basically 4 major sections that we're going to talk about. China, India, the Islamic world, and the Mediterranean. So in the notes at first, it starts with China. So we'll start there. So you can either go back, revise your notes that you already have done, or if you want to like add to it, or you can even just take these notes and then look at them together and then kind of merge them together. So first place is China. All right, so what's happening in China? So the first thing you want to remember is, okay, so what are the major dynasties? You're trying to build content and evidence points with everything. Whatever the writing task is going to be, you have to know key terms. So in this time period, the 600 to 14, what it's talking about here, we're really talking about the Sui, the Tang, and the Song dynasties in China. Mostly these two. In China, this is what we call the golden era, when all those major innovation is happening. They are really becoming experts at farming. They're becoming experts at business, innovation. Many things are happening. The dominant religion at the time is just like in the past, is Confucianism. And that's worked for a long time. But at the end of the Han, many people said the reason why maybe it collapsed is because Confucianism didn't work. And some people were open to trying new things. So if you remember that Silk Road, lots of traders were coming through, people who were sharing different ideas about religion. And Buddhism is going to emerge. And when Buddhism comes in, some people like it, and it becomes very popular. But there's also a lot of critics. And mostly the people who do not like it are people who are working for the government, people who are not ready for change, people who don't like the fact that it's foreign. They use different writing, the fact that they require their people to be celibate, which means goes against Confucianism, having a family. Also, if you're in the monasteries, you're exempt from paying taxes, and people, especially the government, does not like that. So for a while, they persecute Buddhism, and it kind of gets stalls out a little bit. But over time, they become more willing and more open to accepting in it, and it becomes the dominant religion. You'll also remember, as a way to kind of win people back, they revived Confucianism with Neo-Confucianism. So when we say, again, that golden era, what makes it so golden is because of those innovations. And you'll see, if you look on the notes that I'm also posting, some of the key terms. We also did a great chart on this of all the innovations in China at this time and what kind of impact they had. So all the innovation and wealth. So because they're getting so wealthy, it's providing many things to happen. People are moving to the cities because they're going to start working in businesses. Population is going to start to increase because they've also been off exploring and taking over land and having encounters, specifically with Vietnam, where they're going to encounter that fast-growing rice, and that's going to help population boom. So with more people, you can have more business, more industry, and as people become more wealthy, a new thing that's going to emerge is foot binding, to basically then show off their wealth. It's another way. But ultimately, all of this is going to keep going until they get collapsed, just like all empires do. And if you remember who? The Mongols. The specific Mongols are going to keep coming back in. They're going to be, those are the dominant ones. There's lots of nomadic tribes who are going to keep coming in during this time. But finally, the Mongols with that Yuan dynasty will come in and take over China. So there's a lot more details of the story. I advise you go back to your notes and double check it. Review. If any of these topics I'm explaining are not making sense or you've kind of forgotten, you definitely need to review. There's a ton of crash course videos you can review. Look at your notes, ask questions. It's very helpful. So what do we want to remember about India? So India is never going to unify because of its geography, because of just it's kind of set up as a regional kingdom. There's a lot of problems here. So whenever they're talking about India, that's something to always remember. They never unify. And it's kind of set up into different regions. So we have in the north, they'll act like it when you do the reading. It sounds like they're unified, but they're really not. So one of the leaders, his name is Harsha. And he's one of the big leaders to unify in the north. But over time, something else has been happening. Trade, specifically with a foreign country or a foreign region, the Dar al-Islam, the Abbasids. The Abbasid dynasty is right next door, and the Abbasid dynasty is, guess what? Moving in. And when the Abbasids move in, we have some new leaders. We've got like the Sultans of Delhi, Muhammad Ghazi, all these kind of leaders coming in. So you have also Islamic rulers. And if you remember from the notes, some of these Islamic rulers were friendly, tolerant. Some of them were not so much. And they kind of forced the people to convert to Islam. They may have plundered some of their sacred shrines, temples. So it was very complicated, causing some problems in the land. In the south, it's a little bit different. We have mostly it's all about trade, right? Because in the southern region, we want to remember it's all like an emporia. Indian Ocean Basin. That trading that's going to happen. And with that trading happening, different leaders are going to come in. Yes, they're going to be open to different religions in the southern part. It won't be as complex as in the north, but the main thing to think about in the south is all about trade. Everything's going to be dominant on that trade. So the dominant religions, if you remember for India, this is kind of comes up, is in the beginning, it was Hinduism. Then a new religion emerged, which we'll review next week, Buddhism, and got very popular. It was very popular because it didn't believe in the caste system. Remember that caste system is that rigid caste system that said you're born in this position, you die in this position. The only way to change your position is through karma through your good deeds, by doing your duty, doing your dharma. And if you do your duty, then in your next life, you might be reincarnated into a higher position. Some people thought this is not fair. It's the wealthy people who are exploiting us and keeping us down. And when Buddhism came in, people said this is a great opportunity as a way out of this system. And Buddhism, like all things, when the leader converts, got very popular. For the most important leader who you want to make sure you remember is Ashoka. Even he's a little bit back further in our notes, but he's a great leader of Buddhism and had many Buddhist shrines set up, pilgrimages set up, and you can still see those in some of your text. But Buddhism faded out because it starts spreading to Southeast Asia and East Asia. And as it did this, many people started to revert back to Hinduism again. And then later, another religion came in, Islam. And people also liked Islam for the same reasons they liked Buddhism, because it was against the caste system. They didn't follow the system. So now it's a mix between the two, Hinduism and Islam. Very few Buddhists in India. So these are some things to keep in mind about India. Next, let's talk about the Islamic world. All right, so it all starts with